Alright, what's going on, fellow students? Anthony here. So I did my work on surveys, which I'm probably going to be using a lot in my actual research, so this was pretty useful. Alright, so what is a survey? It is a written form that's given to participants to obtain the feelings and perceptions about certain questions. What is key here is that it is not a one-on-one conversation. So this allows the researcher to send out a lot of these forms as opposed to sitting down one at a time. The two main kind of surveys that were talked about, if you look at this top, the what is your favorite subject at school? So sometimes the surveys have specific answers that can be given where the participant has to pick from something that you've offered. And then on the bottom, there's this Likert scale, which is a pretty typical 5-point scale on how much you agree with a given comment. The author talked about some issues here. Like, for example, in that first survey, what is your favorite subject at school? If their favorite subject is a language and it's not there, you haven't given the option, then you're going to get unreliable data. So the key here is to make sure that you either have a box for other or you have an open-ended response, which we're going to talk about. But the main thing is it's these forms that get really specific answers. So what type of data are you going to get? Typically, it's going to be quantitative data. For example, you can take, you can see how many students picked math as their favorite and say, hey, it was 25% of math students. You can really easily quantify all that data. But sometimes it can be qualitative if you ask a open-ended question, and it's really difficult to organize it into a type. And if you can't organize it into a type of question, you can't group it with others and get a quantity out of it. It's more of the qualitative type, but it's mostly quantitative data that we're going to be getting. So what type of questions are best answered here? So these surveys help us understand the attitudes, perceptions, or opinions of the participants. So for example, how a student feels about themselves, their education, their school, their teacher. It's asking the questions really about, how do you perceive the world around you, and letting the researcher better understand the individual student. Like I said, personally, this is helpful to my research as I am going to be doing some research on self-efficacy, which is a student's perception of their own ability. So it's hard to kind of measure empirically and not without it being self-reported. So the survey is the best way to go here. All right, so what are the strengths of using a survey? So like we said before, it's really easily quantifiable. You can just count up how many students picked a 5, as in I completely agree, a 0 as in I completely disagree, or you can count how many picked science or math. It's really easy to count. Second, we can get a large number of responses. So the researcher does not have to be sitting in front of a participant. They can send out, like I will probably do, I'll send out a Google form to all of my students, and I can just get it all done in 10 minutes or however long it takes them all to do it. An additional strength here is that all this data, kind of like I said, can easily be gathered and analyzed by a computer. So you can just send out a Google form. Hey, click on this scale 0 to 5, or choose between these subjects, and then you can input that and do like a Excel spreadsheet or a Google spreadsheet, and you can just write a couple formulas that has the sheet add up all the responses and give you all these different analytics on it. So that's a really nice strength. Some weaknesses here are that a survey can be possibly inaccurate. For example, if I say, what's your favorite pet? And I give you two options, dog or cat. You have to pick a dog or a cat. But if your favorite pet is really a lizard, but it's not on that list, and you pick dog, well, it makes it look like dog's a lot more popular than it really is. They also can be inaccurate for reasons that I'm going to talk a little bit more down the road. Another weakness is that it can be really difficult analyzing open-ended questions because you might not be able to like I stated before, you might not be able to put a response into a category. And if you can't kind of put it into a category, it's really hard to quantify it. So that's another reason. And then another weakness is that you don't have a face-to-face, which is it's also its strength. So the weakness part of the face-to-face is if you're working with someone and they don't understand a question, they can ask you to clarify the question, or you can ask the participant to clarify their answer and get some more information. In this survey, it's not personal, so you can't really ask those clarifying questions to really have them understand the question or for you to understand their response. So that part of it is both a strength and a weakness. So here are some personal concerns I have about surveys. And this is actually something that I was meaning to have, a conversation pretty soon as I think about actually doing it. So I have a big concern about both validity and ethics, the combined issue there. So I'm thinking about asking students how, their perceptions about math. And my concern is if, in order to collect all the data that I'm going to have to collect, I need to know their names because I need to know how, Sally responded on this questionnaire, how Sally did on the test, how Sally did on the post-test, pre-test. I need to be able to connect all my information, so I have to know who's who. But the question is, how valid is that data going to be? If they know that I know who's responding, they either A, might want to respond more positively because they don't want to hurt my feelings, or B, which is maybe more likely, they want to respond more negatively as a stick it to the man. So am I going to get valid responses if they attach their names to their responses? So the question then is, can I tell them this is an anonymous survey? I will not be collecting your name because I can do that, right? So Google Forms can automatically collect email addresses, so I don't have to ask the students their names. So I can say, this is an anonymous survey, answer honestly. I'm not collecting your name because I'm not, but I am collecting their email address, and I can obviously just figure out their name from their email address. So is that poor ethics? But I get more valid data? It's a real question I have here. And then also questions about reliability. If I ask them, hey, do you like math? And say they had a really great day. They're like, yeah, I love math, easy, it's awesome, woohoo. Or they had a bad day, or they didn't sleep well last night and they're in a bad mood. Am I getting reliable data on their perceptions? Does a single response reflect the overall feeling that they have? And that's going to really affect the reliability. So like I said, I'm really glad I got this topic because it's something I'm really going to be using with particular concern to this last slide. Thank you and have a wonderful evening.